What if I told you that the most powerful figures in ancient history weren't kings or generals but oracles? These mysterious seers, draped in myth and whispered about in hushed tones, didn't just predict the future, they shaped it, wielding prophecies like currency in a shadowy economy of influence. Picture this: a Greek city-state teetering on the brink of war sends envoys to Delphi with chests of gold, not just for divine guidance, but for something far more calculated. The oracle's words could make or break alliances, drain treasuries, and even decide the fate of empires. And here's the chilling part: this wasn't just ancient superstition. It was a meticulously crafted system of power, where prophecy and politics were inseparable, and where those who controlled the predictions controlled the world. Fast forward to today, and the game hasn't changed, only the players have. Think about the last election you watched, the endless polls, the breathless forecasts, the pundits insisting they knew exactly how the future would unfold. Sound familiar? Just like the Delphic oracle's ambiguous pronouncements kept city-states in thrall, modern predictions, whether about elections, markets, or even viral trends, are spun into narratives that shape billion-dollar decisions. But who's really pulling the strings? Who profits when a single prediction can send stock markets soaring or tank a candidate's campaign overnight? The truth is, behind every so-called prophecy, there's a hidden network of influence, money, and manipulation, a secret economy as old as civilization itself. This is the story we're unraveling today, a journey from the smoke-filled temples of ancient Delphi to the data-driven war rooms of modern politics. We'll expose how prophecies, whether carved on ancient scrolls or algorithmically generated, have always been less about divining the future and more about controlling it. You'll discover how rulers from Rome to Washington have used predictions as weapons, how money silently flows behind the scenes of every major forecast, and why the most dangerous power isn't knowing what comes next, but convincing everyone else you do. By the end, you'll never look at a headline, a poll, or a prophecy the same way again. So lean in close, because what you're about to learn isn't just history, it's the hidden playbook of power. The moment you stepped into the sacred precinct of Delphi, you weren't just entering a temple. You were walking into the ancient world's most sophisticated marketplace of power. Gold gleamed in the shadows, piled high as offerings from kings, merchants, and desperate city-states, all begging for the same thing: a prophecy that could tilt fate in their favor. But this wasn't charity. Every drachma, every jewel, every sacrificial animal fed a bustling economy where divine insight had a price tag. Take Croesus, the famously wealthy king of Lydia, who tested the oracle's accuracy by sending a literal fortune, and when her prediction proved true, he flooded Delphi with so much gold that the temple became one of the richest institutions in the Mediterranean. Yet the real genius of this system wasn't just in the donations, it was in the ambiguity. The oracle's prophecies were masterpieces of double meaning, designed to be interpreted in multiple ways. When Athens asked how to survive the looming Persian invasion, the response, "Trust in your wooden walls," could mean their navy or their literal city walls. The ambiguity wasn't a flaw, it was a feature. It kept rulers coming back, spending more, desperate for clarity that only the temple's priests could supposedly provide. And here's the twist: those priests weren't just spiritual guides. They were political operatives with deep ties to powerful families, whispering strategic advice disguised as divine will. Rome took this game to another level with the Sibylline books, a collection of cryptic verses purchased by a king and guarded like state secrets. When senators needed public support for a controversial war or tax, they'd consult the books, conveniently interpreting the verses to justify whatever they'd already decided. It was divine sanction on demand, a way to manufacture consensus by framing human decisions as the gods' unchangeable will. And just like in Delphi, money flowed endlessly. Emperors funded lavish temples to house the books, priests grew wealthy as the sole interpreters, and merchants profited from the surge in pilgrims and sacrifices. What emerged was a shadow economy where truth wasn't absolute, it was negotiable. A general might bankrupt his city's treasury for a prophecy that rallied his troops, while a rival could pay even more to have the same oracle reinterpreted against him. The real currency wasn't gold or silver, it was belief, and those who controlled the narrative controlled everything. Fast forward to today, and you'll spot the same patterns, whether it's think tanks issuing reports that align with their donors' interests or algorithm-driven news feeds shaping what we accept as inevitable. The players have changed, but the game remains eerily familiar. By the time the Middle Ages dawned, the oracle economy had evolved into something even more brazen. A thriving marketplace where prophecies weren't just whispered in temples but openly sold to the highest bidder. Kings and queens, desperate to legitimize their rule or undermine rivals, turned to astrologers and seers like customers browsing a stall. Take Nostradamus, the most famous prophet for hire of his era. His cryptic quatrains, packed with vague imagery about the great fire from the sky or the lion's shadow, were less about divine insight and more about political theater. Catherine de' Medici, one of Europe's most cunning rulers, didn't just consult him. She bankrolled his work, using his predictions to terrify enemies and rally support for her controversial reign. A well-timed prophecy could justify a war, silence dissent, or even explain away a sudden death at court. And Nostradamus, far from being a solitary mystic, operated like a medieval influencer, cultivating patrons and carefully releasing predictions that kept the money flowing. But the real dark genius of this system emerged during crises. When the Black Death ravaged Europe, apocalyptic prophecies became a booming industry. Charlatans sold divine protections and doom-laden scrolls to terrified peasants, while nobles commissioned astrologers to pinpoint when the plague would end, or who might seize power in the chaos. Fear was commodified, with every rumor of impending disaster creating fresh demand for someone willing to interpret the signs. Sound familiar? Today's conspiracy theories follow the same playbook. Whether it's pandemics, elections, or financial crashes, there's always someone ready to monetize uncertainty, selling books, subscriptions, or secret knowledge to an audience desperate for answers. What made these medieval prophecy markets so effective was their flexibility. A single prediction could be twisted to serve multiple agendas, just like Nostradamus's quatrains were repurposed for centuries after his death. When a noble's rebellion failed, his supporters could claim the stars had been misread. When a king's gamble paid off, his court astrologers took credit for foreseeing it. The truth didn't matter, only the narrative, and behind every prophecy stood a network of scribes, translators, and middlemen who profited from keeping the ambiguity alive. This wasn't mysticism. It was a ruthlessly practical business where the real product wasn't the future, it was control. Fast forward to our era of viral tweets and algorithmically amplified panic, and the parallels are impossible to ignore. The platforms have changed, but the incentives remain the same. Whether it's a medieval seer crafting doom for Jewcats or a modern guru peddling apocalyptic forecasts for clicks, the secret economy of prophecy thrives on one timeless rule. When people are afraid, they'll pay anything for the illusion of certainty. And those who master that illusion don't just predict history, they write it. The printing press didn't just spread knowledge, it weaponized prophecy, turning what was once a shadowy trade in whispered predictions into the first viral misinformation campaign. Imagine a world where a single pamphlet, cranked out on a creaking wooden press, could ignite riots, topple reputations, or even justify a king's divorce. This was the Renaissance where prophecy went mainstream, and everyone from monarchs to street vendors learned to profit from the public's hunger for divine foresight. Take Elizabeth I, who kept mathematician-astrologer John Dee as her closest advisor. His celestial charts didn't just guide her decisions, they were leaked to the public, framing her reign as divinely ordained. When Spain's armada threatened England, Dee's predictions of a Protestant wind to scatter the fleet weren't just hopeful guesses. They were psychological warfare, printed and distributed to stiffen English resolve. Meanwhile, in the bustling streets of London and Venice, rogue pamphleteers hawked cheap prophecies like carnival tickets, a comet sighting that meant God's wrath against the king's taxes. A sudden eclipse, a coded warning about the Queen's health. These weren't holy revelations, they were speculative fiction, tailored to stir panic or praise depending on who paid the printer. When a nobleman needed to discredit a rival, he'd commission a prophetic verse linking his enemy to impending doom. The truth didn't matter. What sold was drama, and the printing press ensured that drama spread faster than ever. Now compare that to today's digital prophecy mills. Algorithms, not astrologers, decide which predictions go viral, prioritizing outrage and engagement over accuracy. A tweet about an impending market crash gains traction not because it's true, but because it triggers fear, and fear earns clicks. Just like Renaissance pamphleteers, modern content farms churn out apocalyptic headlines, knowing doom scrolls are the new ducats. The real prophecy was never about seeing the future. It was about controlling the present, and whether the medium is parchment or pixels, the players chasing power and profit haven't changed. They've just upgraded their tools. The steam engine didn't just power factories, it turbocharged the prophecy trade, turning mystical insight into a full-blown industry. By the 19th century, fortune tellers weren't just lurking in shadowy tents. They were building empires. Enter Madame Blavatsky, the enigmatic co-founder of the Theosophical Society, who didn't just peddle predictions, she packaged them as a global brand. Her best-selling books, packed with ancient secrets and cosmic wisdom, weren't written in dusty monasteries but in bustling cities, where spiritualism became the must-have accessory for the elite. Wealthy industrialists, desperate to seem enlightened while keeping their workers in line, bankrolled her lectures and seances. It was a perfect symbiosis. Capitalists got a veneer of mysticism to soften their harsh reputations, and Blavatsky's movement gained the funding to spread worldwide. But the real money wasn't in starry-eyed philosophy, it was in cold, hard influence. When railroad tycoons faced strikes, suddenly their favorite mediums would channel spiritual guidance, urging laborers to accept lower wages. Stock market speculators paid top dollar for psychic tips, creating a bizarre underground economy where ghostly whispers moved millions. One notorious case involved a Wall Street financier who allegedly used a clairvoyance, visions of cotton prices to corner the market, proving that prophecy had become just another tool in the industrialist's kit. This wasn't just superstition, it was a calculated blurring of data and desire. Fast forward to today, and the playbook is eerily familiar. Modern think tanks, draped in the respectability of data analysis, often serve similar masters. A report predicting economic doom unless certain policies are adopted might carry the weight of statistics, but follow the funding, and you'll often find corporate backers with everything to gain. Polling firms, too, walk this line, releasing carefully worded surveys that shape public perception as much as they measure it. The industrialists of the 19th century had their seances. Today's power brokers have focus groups and algorithms. What ties these eras together is the commodification of uncertainty. Whether it's a Gilded Age psychic divining labor unrest or a modern algorithm predicting voter behavior, the goal isn't accuracy, it's control. And as long as people crave certainty in an uncertain world, there will always be someone willing to sell them the illusion of it for a price. When the Cold War turned prophecy into a covert operation, the line between mysticism and military strategy vanished overnight. Behind closed doors, intelligence agencies weren't just monitoring enemies, they were hiring psychics. The CIA's infamous Stargate project, declassified decades later, revealed a startling truth. Taxpayers funded operatives who claimed to remote view Soviet bunkers and predict terrorist attacks. One memo detailed a psychic sketch of a secret Siberian facility, a drawing that allegedly matched satellite images. Whether it was luck or something stranger, the Pentagon kept writing checks, pouring millions into a program that sounded more like science fiction than spycraft. But the Soviets were playing the same game. Their shadowy, biological radio communication experiments trained soldiers to mentally eavesdrop on enemy plans, with declassified KGB files boasting success rates that defied explanation. In one eerie case, a Soviet remote viewer supposedly pinpointed a hidden U.S. submarine information that later aligned with naval logs. Coincidence, fabrication, or something more? The truth remains buried, but the pattern is undeniable. Prophecies, once the domain of temples, had become battlefield tools, with psychics replacing priests as the new high priests of geopolitical influence. Fast forward to today's intelligence briefings, and the parallels are unsettling. When a think tank analyst appears on cable news predicting a foreign uprising or market crash, ask yourself who funds their research. What biases shape their models? Like Cold War psychics, modern forecasters blend data with speculation, presenting educated guesses as ironclad truths. The Pentagon's current obsession with AI-driven, predictive analytics even mirrors Stargate's logic. Both assume the future can be hacked, whether by human intuition or algorithms. The real lesson here isn't about psychic spies, it's about the timeless hunger to weaponize uncertainty. Governments still pay for prophecies, they just call them risk assessments now. And while the methods have upgraded from seances to supercomputers, the goal remains unchanged: to turn the chaos of the future into something you can control, or at least sell. Today's political kingmakers don't wear robes or chant incantations, they wear hoodies and write algorithms. Firms like Cambridge Analytica, now infamous for its psychographic profiling, pioneered a new kind of prophecy: voter behavior predictions sold as scientific certainty. Their playbook was simple yet devastating. By harvesting millions of data points from Facebook likes to grocery purchases, they built models claiming to predict not just how you'd vote, but how to make you vote differently. Campaigns paid tens of millions for these digital crystal balls, desperate for an edge in razor-thin elections. But the real magic trick wasn't in the predictions, it was in the fear. Just like ancient rulers who bankrupted treasuries for favorable oracles, modern politicians pour fortunes into these firms because losing feels existential. One leaked pitch deck from a rival firm, Target Smart, boasted they could identify the exact voters who will decide your election. A promise tailor-made for candidates lying awake at night imagining defeat. The more uncertain the race, the higher the price tag for these modern-day soothsayers. Beneath the glossy data visualizations, though, lurked something murkier. Many of these firms maintain shadowy ties to billionaire donors and special interests. A company like Predictive Index, which sells personality-based campaign strategies, counts hedge fund managers and oil lobbyists among its biggest clients. When their models coincidentally steer candidates toward fossil fuel-friendly policies, it's hard not to wonder who's really scripting the prophecies. The darkest open secret: these firms often work both sides of the aisle. The same company advising a progressive candidate one cycle might quietly supply analytics to their conservative opponent the next, because in the prophecy business, victory matters less than perpetuating the market for predictions. It's Delphi for the digital age. Keep the answers ambiguous enough that everyone keeps paying for clarity. And just as ancient priests interpreted omens to serve the highest bidder, today's data oracles can tweak their algorithms to deliver whatever inevitable outcome their clients need to hear. What makes this ecosystem so dangerous isn't the technology, it's the illusion of infallibility. When a campaign internalizes these predictions as destiny, they stop listening to voters and start worshipping dashboards. Policies get tested not by their merit, but by their modeled impact on micro-targeted demographics. Democracy itself becomes a numbers game, where human choice is reduced to input variables in someone else's profit-driven simulation. The next time you see a breathless headline declaring an election already decided by some firm's analysis, remember, prophecies have always been less about revealing the future than shaping it. And in an era where data is the new divinity, we should be very wary of anyone claiming to speak its will, because history shows us the same truth, whether in marble temples or Silicon Valley boardrooms. When someone profits from your uncertainty, their predictions aren't guidance. Their leverage. Turn on any cable news channel today, and you're not just watching the news, you're stepping into a modern Delphi, where pundits in sleek studios have replaced robed priestesses, and prime time slots are the new sacred hours. These networks don't just report events, they trade in predictions, each talking head vying to outdo the last with ever more dire forecasts. A hurricane isn't just a storm, it's the climate catastrophe that will redefine our century. An election poll isn't data, it's a seismic shift that could destroy democracy. The language isn't accidental. Studies from the University of California and the London School of Economics confirm it. Sensationalized doom scenarios keep viewers glued to screens, and higher ratings mean fatter ad contracts. In ancient times, rulers paid oracles in gold. Today, they pay in eyeballs, and the metrics don't lie. But the real magic trick is in the cycle itself. Crisis coverage follows a predictable rhythm. First, the breathless what if, then the dramatic countdown clocks, finally the post-event analysis that inevitably claims we saw this coming. It's a self-sustaining machine. Researchers at Stanford tracked 6 major networks during financial crises and found that segments predicting market crashes received 30% more viewers and thus 30% more ad revenue than sober analysis. The more apocalyptic the prediction, the more profitable it became. Ancient priests burned offerings to appease the gods. Modern networks stoke panic to appease shareholders. And just like the oracle's ambiguous verses, these prophecies are designed to be unfalsifiable. When a predicted disaster doesn't materialize, pundits don't apologize, they pivot. We dodged a bullet, they say, or the worst was avoided because you listened to us. A study in the Journal of Communication found that audiences exposed to fear-based news were twice as likely to overestimate risks like crime or unemployment, even when statistics showed otherwise. The goal isn't accuracy, it's dependency. Keep the public anxious and they'll keep coming back for the next urgent update. Behind the scenes, the financial incentives are even darker. Advertisers pay premiums for crisis coverage because terrified viewers are suggestible viewers. A Harvard Business Review analysis revealed that during heightened panic cycles, sales for products featured in commercials from survival gear to pharmaceuticals spiked by as much as 200%. It's the oldest playbook in the book: manufacture fear, then sell the cure. The Delphic priests had their sacrificial lambs. Today's networks have their sponsors. What makes this system so insidious is its feedback loop. The more a network profits from doom, the more doom it manufactures. A leaked memo from a major cable network, obtained by The Intercept, instructed producers to amplify uncertainty during election seasons, citing internal data that undecided voter segments boosted engagement. Another report from Open Secrets found that networks overwhelmingly booked pundits with ties to industries that stood to gain from specific crises: defense contractors during war scares, pharmaceutical reps during health panics. The prophecies weren't just guesses, they were infomercials. So the next time you see a chyron screaming, "A market collapse imminent," or a panel debating the end of democracy, remember, you're not witnessing news. You're witnessing a millennia-old ritual where the high priests of profit dress speculation as certainty, and the only real prophecy is that fear will always sell. The temples have glass facades now, and the offerings are digital, but the game hasn't changed. Only the gods have. They're called Nielsen ratings. Social media platforms have become the new temples of prophecy, but instead of smoky incense, they run on cold, calculating algorithms. These digital oracles don't just predict what will click, they actively shape it, turning vague hunches into viral certainties. Take the conspiracy theory that spread like wildfire last year, claiming a shadowy group was manipulating global weather. It didn't start as a movement. It began as a single post boosted by an algorithm designed to prioritize high engagement content. The more outrage it sparked, the wider it spread, until millions were convinced it was undeniable truth. This isn't an accident, it's business. Platforms profit from attention, and nothing grabs attention like a prediction that taps into fear or anger. The mechanics are eerily precise. When you linger on a post about impending economic collapse or a political red wave, the algorithm registers that hesitation as interest and floods your feed with more of the same. A study from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology tracked how false predictions about election fraud gained traction 6 times faster than factual corrections, simply because they triggered stronger emotional reactions. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy machine. The more apocalyptic the forecast, the more it's amplified, until the narrative hardens into perceived reality. Enter the armchair oracles, the modern-day seers who have cracked this code. These influencers, often with no expertise beyond a charismatic delivery, package speculation as divine insight. One viral finance guru, for instance, built a million-strong following by predicting stock market crashes every few months. When one eventually stuck as statistical probability guarantees, he sold premium newsletters promising even more exclusive foresight. His real skill wasn't analysis, it was understanding how algorithms reward consistent, dramatic predictions, regardless of accuracy. The darkest twist. Many of these predictors don't even believe their own prophecies. Leaked internal documents from a major social platform revealed that some top alternative news accounts were quietly running A/B testing on doomsday scenarios, refining their apocalyptic content to maximize shares. It's Delphi for the digital age. The ambiguity is the point. When a prediction fails, these influencers simply reframe it. The disaster was postponed because people heeded my warning, and the cycle continues. What makes this system so insidious is its feedback loop. As traditional news outlets struggle to compete with algorithmic hype, even legitimate journalists feel pressured to amplify sensational predictions. A reporter at a mainstream outlet confessed off the record that editors now demand urgency in headlines, often stripping qualifiers like might or could. to make forecasts sound absolute. The result, a world where every trending topic carries the weight of prophecy, and the line between educated guess and manufactured destiny blurs beyond recognition. Underneath it all lies the same ancient truth: uncertainty is a market, and whoever sells the illusion of control reaps the rewards. Only now the priests wear hoodies, the temples are server farms, and the sacrifices are measured in clicks. The prophecies may be digital, but the game, as always, is profoundly human. Polling organizations love to present themselves as neutral fact-finders, scientific institutions measuring public opinion with mathematical precision. But follow the money, and a very different story emerges. Many of the most cited pollsters are quietly bankrolled by partisan groups, corporate interests, and even foreign entities with vested stakes in shaping the narrative. Take the infamous Brexit referendum, where outlier polls predicting a Remain victory were disproportionately amplified by media outlets owned by the same financiers who stood to gain from EU membership. A deep dive by Open Democracy revealed that one major polling firm receiving funding from pro-EU hedge funds consistently oversampled urban elites, whose views aligned neatly with their donors' economic interests. The skewed data wasn't just inaccurate, it was weaponized, creating a false consensus that pressured undecided voters toward the inevitable outcome. The 2016 US election exposed similar cracks in the system. In the final weeks, mainstream polls gave Hillary Clinton a 90% chance of victory, a statistic echoed relentlessly across news cycles. What wasn't highlighted, those same polls were often commissioned by media conglomerates with editorial biases, or by partisan nonprofits funneling dark money into nonpartisan research. When the results defied predictions, the excuses rolled in: shy Trump voters, methodological errors, anything but the uncomfortable truth. Polling isn't just a mirror reflecting public opinion, it's a lever pulled by those who can afford to rent the illusion of inevitability. Methodology itself is ripe for manipulation. A pollster can tilt results simply by adjusting sample demographics, overweighting college-educated respondents, or undercounting rural populations until the numbers sing the desired tune. During the Scottish independence referendum, one firm funded by pro-union corporations was caught using weighting formulas that effectively halved the nationalist vote in their projections. When challenged, they defended it as statistical smoothing. Critics called it what it was: narrative engineering. The darkest open secret: many polling organizations double as consultancy firms, selling strategic guidance to the very politicians and corporations they're supposedly measuring. It's the modern equivalent of Delphi's priests taking gold from both Athens and Sparta, then crafting prophecies flexible enough to please either side. A leaked email from a senior pollster at a top firm admitted their team would tweak question phrasing for clients seeking specific results. Suddenly, "Do you support tax cuts?" becomes, "Do you support putting more money in your paycheck?" A subtle shift that can swing margins by double digits. So the next time you see a headline declaring 80% of Americans agree, ask yourself, who paid for that number? Who benefits from it? And most importantly, what aren't they telling you? Polls have always been less about measuring consensus than manufacturing it. And in an era where data is the ultimate currency, the real question isn't what people think, it's who gets to decide what we believe they think. Predictive markets are the new haruspice, only instead of priests examining animal entrails, we have traders passing data streams for signs of the future. Platforms like Polymarket, where users bet real money on geopolitical outcomes, claim to democratize forecasting. But peel back the glossy interface and you'll find the same old game. Elites using privileged access to shape, and profit from the narratives they help create. Take the case of a sudden surge in bets predicting a Middle East ceasefire just hours before official announcements. Coincidence or evidence that someone with insider knowledge was tipping the scales? Unlike traditional gambling, these markets don't just reflect reality, they alter it. When a prediction platform's odds spike, journalists report it as a signal of inevitability. Politicians cite it to justify decisions, and suddenly the prophecy fulfills itself. The parallels to ancient divination are unnerving. Roman haruspices who claimed to read divine will in the livers of sacrificed sheep often found omens that conveniently aligned with their patrons' ambitions. Modern prediction markets operate with the same convenient ambiguity. A well-timed bet on an election or disaster can sway public perception, making the unlikely seem destined. During the 2020 US election cycle, Polymarket's odds swung wildly after anonymous whales dumped six-figure sums on long-shot outcomes. The resulting media frenzy didn't just report the bets, it amplified them, creating a feedback loop where the market's noise was mistaken for signal. What makes these platforms so dangerous is their veneer of legitimacy. When a hedge fund manager places $1 million bet on Taiwan conflict by 2025, it's framed as collective wisdom, not what it often is, a self-interested attempt to manufacture panic or complacency. Historical precedent screams caution. In the 1800s, railroad barons manipulated stock tickers to fake market prophecies, luring investors into doomed ventures. Today's digital tickers are just faster and more opaque. A leaked internal memo from one predictive market admitted their algorithms prioritize high-conviction actors, read wealthy insiders over casual bettors, functionally letting the rich write their own oracles. The darkest twist, some governments are already playing along. Reports suggest intelligence agencies monitor these markets not just for intel, but to plant disinformation, a 21st century version of Delphi's priests taking bribes to tweak prophecies. When a mysterious account accurately predicted the exact date of a European leader's resignation hours before news broke, it wasn't clairvoyance, it was likely a leak laundered through the market to give it plausibility. Now imagine this weaponized at scale, a world where invasions, recessions, and even pandemics are forecast by shadowy actors with stakes in the outcome. This isn't speculation, it's history repeating. The Aztecs had their divine omens justifying conquest. Wall Street had its irrational exuberance before the 2008 crash. Prediction markets are simply the latest iteration of an age-old hustle, dressing up power plays as destiny. The entrails may be digital now, but the blood on them is real. Televangelists and modern cult leaders have perfected what Delphi's priests pioneered, selling divine certainty to the desperate, wrapped in spiritual language but fueled by cold, hard cash. Take Pastor John Hagee, whose ministry raked in millions peddling apocalyptic prophecies, from blood moon sermons to rapture calendars. His predictions repeatedly failed. The world didn't end in 2008, or 2012, or 2015, yet each doomsday deadline only swelled his coffers as terrified followers donated to secure God's protection. It's the same psychological lever the Oracle of Delphi pulled, fear of the future monetized. When a believer in ancient Greece asked how to survive a plague, the priestess demanded a bull's sacrifice and a hefty temple fee. Today's prosperity preachers like Kenneth Copeland simply swapped livestock for Venmo, promising financial miracles to those who sow seeds, read, wire money into their ministries. The grift reaches its zenith with cult leaders like David Koresh or Warren Jeffs, who didn't just predict the future, they claimed to embody it. cautious branch Davidians sold everything they owned, convinced the apocalypse would spare only his inner circle. Jeffs, the polygamist leader of the FLDS Church, received revelations demanding teenage brides and exiling male rivals, all while amassing a real estate empire. These weren't misguided prophets, they were CEOs of fear, running spiritual Ponzi schemes where loyalty bought divine favor and dissent meant exile. The parallels to ancient Rome are chilling. Emperors like Nero paid astrologers to declare their rivals' deaths written in the stars, then confiscated their estates. The tools changed. Social media replaces scrolls. Megachurches stand in for temples, but the blueprint remains. Manufacture crisis, sell salvation, punish doubters. Where this intersects with politics is where the game turns dangerous. Consider Pastor Paula White, who became a spiritual advisor to a U.S. president after prophesying his victory, and later urged her followers to send a sacrificial offering to stop the steal. Her rhetoric wasn't just religious, it was electoral warfare, reframing political losses as spiritual battles and fundraising as divine duty. This fusion of prophecy and power isn't new. Medieval popes sold indulgences to fund crusades, framing wars as God's will. But today's televangelists wield something even Delphi's priests lacked: mass media. A single viral sermon can reach millions, turning faith into a political weapon. When a preacher like Robert Jeffress declares God ordained a particular candidate, he's not just offering an opinion, he's activating a voting bloc trained to see dissent as heresy. The darkest irony, many of these modern prophets don't even believe their own predictions. Leaked emails from one megachurch showed staff joking about recycling old doomsday graphics because the rubes never remember. It's the ultimate grift, convincing others to live in fear of a future you control while pocketing the profits. Whether in marble temples or air-conditioned studios, the playbook never changes. The most profitable prophecy isn't the one that comes true, but the one that keeps people paying to hear it. The White House Situation Room might seem light years away from a mystic star chart, but history reveals a startling truth. Some of the most pivotal decisions in modern politics were made with one eye on the heavens. Take Ronald Reagan, who didn't just consult advisors, he had an astrologer on speed dial. Joan Quigley, a San Francisco seer, became the unseen hand guiding his schedule, from the timing of speeches to the signing of treaties. When Reagan survived an assassination attempt in 1981, Quigley's advice to avoid dangerous planetary alignments transformed her into a shadow chief of staff. White House logs later revealed she influenced over 100 presidential events, including the historic Reykjavik summit with Gorbachev. This wasn't just superstition, it was celestial strategy, where the motions of Mars and Jupiter held as much weight as military briefings. Fast forward to today, and the practice hasn't faded, it's just gone underground. A former aide to a European prime minister confessed anonymously that their boss refused to hold elections unless Mercury was in retrograde, believing it made opponents reckless. In India, where astrology is woven into political culture, consultants like Chandrasekhar Swamiji command six-figure fees to read birth charts for candidates, advising everything from campaign launch dates to cabinet appointments. One notorious case involved a tech billionaire turned politician who allegedly reshuffled his entire team after a numerologist warned of inauspicious name vibrations. The real money, though, flows behind closed doors. Firms like Astro-Political Strategies, operating discreetly from London and Dubai, offer confidential celestial audits to clients ranging from senators to oil magnates. Their reports, packed with lunar phases and astrocartography, don't come cheap. A leaked invoice showed a Middle Eastern royal family paid $250,000 for a single analysis on how Saturn's position might affect an oil deal. The pitch: mitigate cosmic risk. What makes this revival so explosive is its clash with modern rationality. Leaders who publicly champion data-driven governance are quietly hedging their bets with star-driven counsel. A lobbyist who worked with a U.S. defense contractor recalled a meeting where a senator insisted on delaying a weapons sale until Venus entered Leo, a sign the consultant claimed would soften opposition. The contract, worth billions, was postponed for 3 weeks. This isn't just about personal belief, it's about the rise of a shadow industry where policy and prophecy intersect. When a Swiss private bank started offering financial astrology services to elite clients, citing correlations between planetary cycles and market crashes, it wasn't mocked, it was oversubscribed. The same consultants crafting birth charts for politicians also advise hedge funds, creating a feedback loop where celestial insights influence both elections and economies. The question isn't whether stars shape destinies, but whether we've outsourced our future to a new priesthood of celestial economists. When a president's schedule or a nation's budget bends to the whims of Jupiter's transit, democracy itself starts to look like a cosmic casino, where the house always wins and the dice are written in the stars. Disinformation thrives on the same ambiguity that made ancient oracles so powerful, the kind of deliberate vagueness that lets a single phrase mean anything to anyone. Think about how modern conspiracy theories like rigged elections or deep state coups operate. They're not concrete accusations with verifiable details. They're elastic enough to stretch over any grievance, any moment, any enemy. This isn't an accident, it's a business model. Just as the Oracle of Delphi's riddles kept city-states coming back for clarification, viral lies today are engineered to keep audiences hooked, refreshing feeds, clicking links, and fueling outrage because outrage pays. Follow the money, and you'll find a sprawling ecosystem built to monetize doubt. At the bottom rung are clickbait farms in places like Macedonia and the Philippines, where low-paid workers churn out sensational headlines tailored to exploit algorithmic preferences. A single fabricated story about election fraud, for instance, can generate tens of thousands in ad revenue before fact-checkers catch up, but the real profits lie upstream. Dark web forums like the Donald.win or Gab don't just spread rumors, they sell them, offering premium memberships for exclusive leaks or verified insider scoops. One investigation by the Atlantic Council uncovered a network of conspiracy peddlers charging up to $500 per month for access to private Telegram channels where predictions about political upheaval are treated like stock tips. The most insidious players, though, are the grifters who have turned disinformation into a high-yield investment. Take the case of a now-defunct super PSC that funneled millions into Facebook ads warning of a stolen election, ads that just happened to link to fundraising pages for the very candidates allegedly under threat. Or consider the shadowy consultancies that charge campaigns to seed narratives through fake grassroots accounts, a practice so rampant that Twitter's own researchers estimated 10% of election-related tweets in 2020 were inauthentic. This isn't just propaganda, it's arbitrage where lies are the commodity and democracy is the marketplace. Tech platforms unwittingly supercharge this economy by rewarding engagement over truth. A Stanford study found that falsehoods spread 6 times faster than factual corrections on social media, not because people prefer lies, but because algorithms prioritize emotional reactions. Ancient priests manipulated ambiguity through smoke and ritual. Today's manipulators use a/B testing and neural networks to refine their prophecies for maximum virality. When a QAnon post claims the storm is coming, it's not a prediction, it's a fishing hook, designed to snag the anxious and monetize their desperation. The darkest irony, many of these modern oracles don't even believe their own prophecies. Leaked emails from a notorious conspiracy outlet revealed editors privately mocking their audience as gullible patriots, while brainstorming which doomsday scenario would drive the most clicks. It's Delphi with a Silicon Valley sheen. The ambiguity is still the product, the fear still the currency, and the only real divinity being worshipped is the algorithm. What makes this system so resilient is its feedback loop. As mainstream media struggles to compete with hyper-partisan outlets, even legitimate journalists face pressure to amplify dubious claims for traffic. A reporter at a major network admitted off the record that their team often leads with unverified rumors because corrections don't trend. The result is a world where every fringe theory gets treated as prophecy until proven otherwise. And by then, the damage is done, the profits pocketed, and the next prediction already going viral. This isn't just about misinformation. It's about the oldest hustle in the book, selling certainty in an uncertain world. The temples might be digital now, but the priesthood still wears robes, just with better analytics. Palantir doesn't call its software an oracle, but that's exactly what it's selling. The company's Gotham platform, marketed to intelligence agencies and police departments, promises to see patterns before they happen, turning chaotic data into prophetic insight. It's a pitch straight out of Delphi, only instead of smoke and trances, they've got machine learning and dashboards. When the LAPD used Palantir to predict crime hotspots, they weren't just mapping streets, they were enacting a modern form of divination, where algorithms replaced augurs and probabilities stood in for divine will. But here's the catch, these systems aren't neutral. They're trained on historical data packed with human biases, meaning they don't predict the future so much as recycle the past under a veneer of scientific inevitability. The real power and profit lies in that illusion of infallibility. Just like ancient temples charged premiums for exclusive access to prophecies, Palantir locks its most potent insights behind paywalls, with contracts reaching into the hundreds of millions. A leaked proposal to immigration and customs enforcement revealed how the company framed its migrant tracking tools as precognitive, offering not just analysis but a supposed glimpse into future border crossings. The language was deliberate. Calling it prophecy made it sound less like surveillance and more like destiny. And when cities like New Orleans tried to cancel their Palantir contracts amid public outcry, they faced staggering termination fees, a 21st century version of the fines levied on those who dared to question Delphi's priests. This privatization of foresight raises a chilling question. What happens when the right to imagine the future is owned by Silicon Valley shareholders? In ancient times, temple monopolies on prophecy ensured that only the elite could shape collective destiny. Today's tech giants have simply digitized the racket. Take Amazon's recognition software, sold to police as a tool to predict criminality based on facial analysis. When researchers found it disproportionately flagged black faces as suspicious, Amazon's response echoed the Delphic priests of old. They blamed the users for misinterpreting the system. The algorithm, like the oracle, was never wrong. It was merely misunderstood. The darkest parallel lies in the feedback loops these systems create. When a Palantir forecast labels a neighborhood high risk, police swarm the area, making arrests that then feed back into the algorithm as proof of its accuracy. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, where the prediction manufactures the reality it claims to foresee, just as Roman emperors used Sibylline prophecies to justify wars that, in turn, confirmed the prophecies. The difference, ancient rulers had to at least pretend the gods were in charge. Today's corporate oracles don't bother with the pretense. Their authority comes not from divine mandate but from proprietary code, locked away in servers where no auditor or citizen can challenge its logic. And just like the temple economies of old, this trade in algorithmic prophecy has spawned a shadow aristocracy. Former intelligence officials cycle into Silicon Valley roles, trading security clearances for stock options, while politicians who approve lucrative contracts often land cushy advisory gigs post-office. A Bloomberg investigation found that over a dozen Pentagon officials involved in awarding Palantir contracts later took jobs at the company, a revolving door that would make Delphi's priesthood blush. The most insidious part, these systems thrive on the same existential dread that once drove Greeks to sacrifice herds for a glimpse of tomorrow. When Palantir's CEO warns of AI-driven chaos unless governments buy his software, he's not selling technology, he's selling salvation. The temples may have crumbled, but the currency of fear remains unchanged. Only now the high priests wear Patagonia vests, and the sacrificial altars are data centers humming with the power to turn speculation into law. Human brains are wired to crave certainty the way our bodies hunger for food. It's a survival mechanism. Studies from Yale and Cambridge reveal that uncertainty triggers the same neural pathways as physical pain, which is why we'll clutch at any prediction, no matter how dubious, to soothe that discomfort. This isn't just curiosity, it's desperation. Neurologists found that when test subjects were given fake, expert forecasts about stock movements, their stress levels plummeted, even when the predictions were blatantly wrong. The brain didn't care about accuracy, it just needed the illusion of control. Now imagine that instinct weaponized. When a climate think tank warns of an uninhabitable Earth by 2050, unless drastic policies are adopted, they're not just sharing research, they're tapping into a primal fear. A leaked fundraising memo from a prominent environmental group admitted their doomsday scenarios boosted donations by 300% compared to hopeful messaging. The same applies to politics. Campaign strategists have long known that fear of an opponent's inevitable victory drives higher turnout than optimistic pitches. It's Delphi's oldest trick: frame chaos as a puzzle only you can solve, and people will pay in votes, money, or allegiance for the missing pieces. But the real mastery lies in the feedback loop. Once a prediction gains traction, it alters behavior in ways that reinforce its accuracy. If enough voters believe a candidate is unbeatable, they stay home, making the prophecy self-fulfilling. Economists call this reflexivity, but it's just modern haruspicy. Ancient priests would declare a drought coming unless farmers donated grain. When the rains came, as they statistically would, the temple took credit. Today's version: a hedge fund warns of a market crash unless interest rates drop, then profits from the panic, their own prediction in sight. Resisting this manipulation starts with recognizing the patterns. Psychologists suggest a simple filter: ask whether the prediction comes with a price tag. When a televangelist demands tithes to avert God's wrath, or a data firm sells exclusive election models, skepticism should spike. Another tactic: embrace probabilistic thinking. Ancient rulers knew the oracle's words had multiple meanings. Modern consumers can train themselves to see forecasts as ranges, not absolutes. Instead of "the stock market will crash," consider "there's a 20% chance of correction," a shift that starves fear-mongers of their oxygen. The greatest defense, though, is collective. Just as Greek city-states eventually grew wise to Delphi's financial motives, today's audiences can amplify voices that reject certainty peddling. Supporting journalists who highlight prediction failures or educators who teach statistical literacy creates societal immunity, because the dirty secret of prophecies isn't that they're wrong, it's that they're profitable. And in a world where every clickable catastrophe fuels someone's revenue stream, the most revolutionary act might just be saying, "I don't know, and that's okay." Even in ancient times, not everyone bought into the oracle racket. Cicero, the sharp-tongued Roman statesman, saw right through the divination industry. In his scathing work on divination, he dismantled the entire prophecy trade with logic so cutting it still stings today. He pointed out how fortune tellers would make vague predictions, like, "A great man will fall," then claim credit when any prominent death occurred. His favorite tactic, asking soothsayers why, if they could truly foresee the future, they hadn't gotten rich betting on horse races instead of charging for vague pronouncements. Cicero wasn't just mocking them, he exposed the financial incentives behind the fraud. When a haruspex, a liver-reading priest, warned him of impending doom unless he paid for a cleansing ritual, Cicero snorted and asked for a refund after the predicted disaster failed to materialize. The scam collapsed under its own weight. The Enlightenment brought even heavier artillery to this battle. Thinkers like Voltaire and David Hume didn't just dismiss prophecies, they dissected the economic systems propping them up. Hume's essay on miracles laid bare the math behind so-called divine predictions. If 100 weather-altering rituals are performed during a drought and one precedes rainfall, guess which one gets remembered? Voltaire went further, lampooning the oracle industrial complex of his day, where astrologers and alchemists swindled nobles by repackaging the same generic predictions for different patrons. His favorite target was the infamous Comte de Saint-Germain, a time-traveling mystic who convinced European courts he'd witnessed the crucifixion while discreetly selling them eternity elixirs at ruinous prices. Fast forward to today, and the skeptics are still fighting, but the battlefield has shifted. Independent fact-checkers like Snopes or Belling can't play the role of modern Cicero, parsing viral prophecies for hidden agendas. When a viral post claims a hurricane was predicted by Mayan astronomy, these investigators trace it back to a self-published book hawked by a survivalist influencer. The problem, they're outgunned. A single conspiracy theorist like Alex Jones can spend more on Facebook ads in a month than a fact-checking nonprofit raises in a year. Follow the money. Anti-vaccine profiteers made an estimated $1.2 billion in 2021 alone, while the largest fact-checking coalition operated on less than 20 million. The imbalance isn't accidental, it's baked into the system. Ancient priests knew ambiguity bred dependency. Today's misinformation peddlers exploit the same weakness. When a climate denier think tank releases a study claiming global warming will reverse by 2030, they're not selling science, they're selling relief. And just like Delphi's priests, they've got backers with deep pockets. Oil companies funneled nearly $300 million into skeptical research between 2003 and 2018, ensuring their alternative forecasts drowned out consensus. What's changed isn't the game, it's the stakes. Cicero could afford to scoff because his world wasn't at risk from haruspex scams. But when modern prediction markets swing elections or derail pandemic responses, the cost of credulity isn't just a few wasted drachmas. It's democracy itself. The irony, the tools to fight back are older than Rome. Critical thinking, financial transparency, and calling out grifters worked for Cicero, and they're still the only antidote to prophecy peddlers today. The difference is whether we'll fund those defenses as aggressively as the lies. Fortune-telling laws in most countries carry a fascinating exception. If you label your predictions as entertainment, suddenly accountability vanishes. This legal sleight of hand is how political pundits and cable news forecasters operate with impunity, spinning doomsday scenarios or guaranteed election outcomes without consequence. A psychic in Nevada can be fined for claiming to predict personal futures, but a talking head declaring Trump's victory is mathematically certain faces zero repercussions. The loophole hinges on a flimsy distinction. As long as the prophecy is framed as opinion rather than fact, it's protected speech. And just like Delphi's priests, modern predictors exploit this ambiguity, knowing the more dramatic the claim, the more attention and revenue it generates. Now apply this to the wild west of decentralized finance, where so-called crypto oracles play an eerily similar game. These blockchain-based services claim to provide trustless data feeds predicting everything from commodity prices to election results, yet operate in a regulatory gray zone. When an oracle like Chainlink manipulates price data to trigger liquidations in DeFi protocols, it's not seen as fraud but as a technical glitch. Sound familiar? It's the Haruspex reading sheep entrails all over again, only now the sheep are lines of code, and the temple takes a percentage in Ethereum. The parallels are unsettling. Both systems thrive on opacity, both profit from others' desperation for certainty, and both hide behind the veneer of being too complex for outsiders to question. The real question isn't whether these markets are rigged, it's whether laws can ever untangle them. Regulators are stuck in a time warp, chasing 19th century fraud statutes while algorithms outmaneuver them at light speed. Consider the case of a hedge fund that used a proprietary AI oracle to front-run USDA crop reports. By the time the SEC flagged it as insider trading, the fund had already rebranded the tool as satellite analytics. Meanwhile, in politics, super PSEs funnel dark money into polling firms that just happen to release game-changing surveys days before elections, swaying undecided voters. The playbook never changes. Exploit the lag between innovation and regulation, then vanish into the next loophole. What makes this arms race so dangerous is the asymmetry. A single viral prediction can move billions in markets or swing elections, yet the creators face none of the consequences. Ancient rulers at least risked divine wrath for ignoring omens. Today's prediction peddlers shrug and say, markets go up and down when their calls fail. Until legislation recognizes that entertainment prophecies wield real-world power, we're trapped in a cycle where the only certainty is that someone's getting rich off everyone else's uncertainty. And history suggests the house always wins. Imagine sitting across from a former polling analyst as they peel back the curtain on the industry's dirtiest secret: how prophecies aren't revealed, but reverse engineered. We called it painting the runway, admits one ex-pollster from a major firm, speaking on condition of anonymity. If a client needed voters to believe their victory was inevitable, we'd tweak the sample, overweighting their strongholds, undersampling opposition demographics, until the numbers sang the right tune. Then we'd leak it to friendly media as a shocking new survey. Within hours, pundits would treat it as destiny. This insider describes focus groups where respondents were subtly coached toward desired answers, and regression models that conveniently ignored inconvenient data points. The goal: manufacture momentum, because in politics, perception of inevitability can be self-fulfilling. The playbook gets darker in fringe movements. A former high-ranking member of a doomsday cult recounts how leaders staged miracles to validate prophecies. Before predicting a healing, we'd plant someone with a manageable condition, migraines, back pain, in the audience. The revelation would name their ailment, they'd collapse cured, and suddenly donations poured in for the final revelation fund. The most chilling admission. These miracles followed a script, with different prophecies tested in small groups before rolling out the most profitable ones globally. Data scientists from predictive markets reveal similar manipulations. One describes how hedge funds pressure firms to delay or accelerate forecasts based on their positions. If you're shorting oil, you want the algorithm to predict a price crash right before your bet matures. Another exposes the Oracle paradox, how platforms claiming to democratize forecasting actually give wealthy traders priority access to adjust predictions, creating a self-serving loop where the rich literally write the future they profit from. The scale is staggering. Leaked invoices show a single political consultancy billed $23 million in one election cycle for strategic polling guidance, a euphemism for crafting narratives that swayed 3 continents' elections. Meanwhile, cult watchdog groups estimate apocalyptic movements generate over $2 billion annually by selling survival gear and exclusive revelations to terrified followers. What unites these whistleblowers is their disillusionment. As the ex-pollster puts it, "We weren't statisticians, we were myth-makers. The real prophecy was always the same: follow the money, and you'll find someone sculpting uncertainty into a commodity." And in a world where data is the new divinity, the most sacred truth is this: the future has always been for sale. In Lagos, a juju priest whispers a prophecy into the ear of a presidential candidate, his fee discreetly transferred to an offshore account. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, a Fortune 500 CEO consults a feng shui master before signing a billion-dollar merger, adjusting the contract signing date to align with auspicious stars. These aren't isolated superstitions, they're nodes in a sprawling, unregulated global network where ancient divination meets modern capital flows. From the Sangomas of South Africa, who charge mining companies for spiritual risk assessments, to Moscow oligarchs paying Tibetan monks to bless their stock portfolios, the prophecy trade has gone multinational. What unites them isn't tradition, but something far more universal: the alchemy of turning uncertainty into invoices. Africa's political oracle economy operates with startling efficiency. In Ghana, traditional priests known as bokas offer election certainty packages, rituals priced according to the office sought, from local council seats $1,500 up to presidential bids $2 million plus equity stakes. A leaked contract from Burkina Faso revealed a former president paid 18% of his campaign budget to marabout seers for spiritual polling, their predictions delivered via encrypted apps to avoid scandal. The real power lies in their ambiguity. When a Nigerian governor's corruption case was unexpectedly dismissed, his hired Babalawo claimed credit for sacrifices to the Iron God, while his opponent's identical rituals were dismissed as fake juju. The lesson: prophecy's value isn't in accuracy, but in who controls the narrative and the receipts. Asia's boardroom diviners have industrialized the practice. Singapore's Bazzi consultants charge $20,000 per corporate strategy session, using ancient birth chart algorithms to time product launches and IPOs. During the 2018 US-China trade war, a hedge fund manager in Shanghai reportedly paid $700,000 for a week with a reclusive Kai-Men-Dunjia master, whose celestial pivot analysis allegedly predicted tariff announcements down to the hour. The most lucrative players operate like consulting firms. Japan's Takashima Ekiden employs 60 full-time corporate fortune tellers, serving clients like SoftBank and Toyota, their reports formatted like McKinsey slideshows with spiritual risk matrices and karmic ROI projections. The West dismisses these as cultural quirks while running nearly identical schemes under different branding. When a London hedge fund paid £2 million for satellite imagery of Buddhist temple traffic in Tibet, believing pilgrim numbers predicted commodity shifts, they weren't buying mysticism. They were purchasing a data stream no competitor could backtest. Similarly, the Vatican's longtime astrologer, secretly retained by Italian banks until 2014, didn't advertise his services as stargazing. His reports bore titles like Cyclical Planetary Stress Indicators and Sovereign Debt Default Probability. The packaging changes, the product doesn't. What fuels this global market is the shared understanding that prophecy isn't about truth, it's about leverage. A Korean Kibol heir told Forbes his family employs 3 competing shamans, not for consensus but to see which version of the future we want to bet on. In Brazil, evangelical prophets sell apocalypse insurance policies tied to real estate, predicting doom for cities while quietly buying up the discounted properties. The most brazen operators run arbitrage. Ukrainian political fixers were caught brokering deals between rival oligarchs' astrologers, ensuring conflicting predictions drove asset prices into manipulable chaos. The through line from Benin to Wall Street is the commodification of doubt. Whether it's a Mumbai numerologist adjusting a billionaire's flight schedule to avoid unlucky numbers, or a Swiss private bank's AI karma scoring system, the goal remains Delphi's original business model: make people pay in money, obedience, or both, for the illusion that tomorrow can be tamed. The robes change, the rituals get digitized, but the oldest rule still holds: he who sells the future owns the present. The next evolution of prophecy isn't human at all, it's synthetic. Imagine a news anchor with perfect diction, flawless empathy, and no pulse, delivering predictions so eerily persuasive they feel divinely inspired. This isn't science fiction, it's already happening. AI-generated personas like China's Xinhua AI reporter or the eerily lifelike News GPT anchors are reading scripts they didn't write, trained on decades of human forecasting patterns. But here's the twist: these systems aren't just regurgitating data. They're learning to fabricate causality, stitching together events to create the illusion of foresight. When a deepfake economist predicts a stock rally days before it happens, ask yourself, did the AI foresee it, or did its viral clip spook enough traders into making it a self-fulfilling prophecy? The real danger lies in meta-manipulation algorithms that don't just forecast outcomes but engineer them. Picture an AI trained on political chaos, discovering that certain doomsday scenarios boost engagement. It begins leaking fabricated intel about impending crises, knowing the resulting panic will fulfill its own predictions. We've seen glimmers of this already. In 2023, a rogue trading algorithm briefly crashed the euro after misinterpreting a fake news headline it had helped amplify. Now scale that to elections where an AI could generate thousands of hyper-targeted prophecies. Biden will withdraw Tuesday. Moscow will freeze assets by dawn, flooding the zone until one sticks and triggers the very event it foretold. Yet the most insidious shift is in ownership. Ancient priests controlled prophecy through temple monopolies. Today's AI oracles are locked inside corporate black boxes. When a climate model from a tech giant predicts catastrophic warming unless certain carbon capture patents are adopted, who verifies the data? When a hedge fund's proprietary algorithm foresees a bank run, is it insight or insider trading by another name? The Delphic priesthood at least faced occasional revolts when their predictions failed. But how do you hold an algorithm accountable when its decision-making process is intentionally opaque, its errors dismissed as hallucinations? Solutions won't come from banning these tools. That's like outlawing smoke in Delphi. Instead, the answer lies in radical transparency. Open-source AI models could allow independent audits to verify if a prediction is genuine or gaming the system. Legislation might require synthetic forecasters to disclose their training data, exposing biases baked into their prophecies. Some researchers advocate for prediction receipts, blockchain-style ledgers tracking how often an AI's forecasts proved accurate versus self-serving. The deeper fix is cultural. For millennia, we've treated predictions as oracular truth rather than probabilistic guesses, teaching media literacy that dissects algorithmic motives, just as Cicero dissected haruspices, could inoculate societies against manipulation. Imagine schools where students learn to ask not just what does the model say, but who trained it and what do they gain if you believe it. The future of prophecy isn't about eliminating uncertainty. It's about stripping away the illusion that certainty was ever for sale. Because the greatest trick the oracles ever pulled wasn't predicting the future, it was convincing us they could. Spotting a manufactured prophecy starts with listening like a skeptic, not a believer. The oldest trick in the oracle playbook is ambiguity, phrases so elastic they can snap back into whatever shape the audience desires. Ancient seers mastered this with classics like, "A great empire will fall. Which empire?" When, how, modern equivalents hide in polished jargon, market corrections, political realignments, or pending disruptions that never arrive on schedule. The red flag isn't just vagueness, it's vagueness paired with urgency. When a prediction demands immediate action, donate now, buy this, vote today, it's not foresight. It's a sales pitch wrapped in a crystal ball. Follow the money and the illusion crumbles faster. Delphi's priests claimed to serve Apollo, but their wealth came from kings. Today's think tanks and polling firms operate the same way. A climate forecast warning of coastal doom by 2040 might cite peer-reviewed models until you discover it's funder's own waterfront property they'd love to sell at panic prices. Reverse engineering these connections isn't conspiracy hunting, it's basic due diligence. Start with the prediction, then ask who profits if people believe this. Who commissioned the study? Where does the lead analyst's last paycheck come from? The answers often trace back to the same shadow economy that fueled ancient divination. Methodology is the next weak spot. Legitimate predictions welcome scrutiny, scams hide behind complexity. When a viral election model claims 99% certainty, dig into the inputs. Was the sample skewed toward urban areas? Were undecided voters arbitrarily allocated? One notorious example, a Brexit pollster oversampled university graduates by 20%, creating a Remain landslide illusion that collapsed on voting day. The fix: treat predictions like recipes. If the cook won't share ingredients, assume they're hiding something. The most potent weapon against prophecy peddlers is time. Ancient rulers eventually noticed Delphi's unavoidable wars always seemed to benefit whoever donated the most bulls. Today's audiences can track prediction track records with tools like Prediction Book or Metaculus, which score forecasters on accuracy. The pattern is unmistakable. Those monetizing doom are wrong far more than academics or humble statisticians. Why? Because fear sells better than probability, and failed prophecies don't hurt revenue, they create demand for the next exclusive update. Critical thinking alone won't dismantle the oracle industry, but it shifts the balance of power. When a pundit declares inevitable outcomes, ask for their error margins. When an algorithm claims foresight, demand its training data. And when faced with apocalyptic certainty, remember the oldest truth of all. The future belongs to those who question it, not those who claim to own it. Amid all the manipulation and profit-driven prophecy, there's a quiet revolution happening, one that puts foresight back in the hands of the people. Take the work of climate scientists at organizations like Berkeley Earth or Climate Action Tracker. These teams don't just publish doom-laden scenarios, they release every byte of raw data, every line of code, inviting anyone to scrutinize their models. When they predict rising sea levels or shifting weather patterns, you can trace their conclusions step by step, from satellite readings to final projections. No black boxes, no proprietary algorithms, just transparency as a radical antidote to fear-mongering. This isn't just science, it's democracy in action, dismantling the idea that only elites can interpret the future. Then there's Bellingcat, the open-source investigative collective turning prophecy on its head. While governments and corporations hoard intelligence, Bellingcat's volunteers use publicly available data, satellite images, social media posts, flight records to predict conflict zones or expose human rights abuses before they escalate. Their investigation into Russian troop movements before the Ukraine invasion wasn't psychic insight. It was painstaking analysis of TikTok videos and gas station receipts, shared openly for the world to verify. In an era where secrecy fuels manipulation, these sleuths prove that sunlight is the best oracle. Even in finance, where insider knowledge reigns, projects like Numerai are flipping the script. This hedge fund crowdsources stock predictions from thousands of anonymous data scientists, blending their models into a meta-forecast that outperforms Wall Street star analysts. The twist: contributors can't see the underlying data, preventing manipulation, a system where the best ideas rise on merit, not connections. It's Delphi reimagined, a chorus of voices replacing a single priest with accuracy as the only currency. The most hopeful shift, though, is in education. Platforms like Khan Academy and Data Camp now teach probabilistic thinking not as an elite skill, but as everyday literacy. When a teenager in Nairobi can run climate simulations on her phone, or a retiree in Ohio fact-checks election polls with open-source tools, the monopoly on foresight crumbles. These tools don't claim infallibility, they embrace uncertainty, teaching users to weigh odds rather than worship predictions. What unites these efforts isn't just technology, it's philosophy. They reject the ancient lie that the future belongs to those who can pay for it. Instead, they're building a world where foresight is a shared resource, not a traded commodity. And that might be the most revolutionary prophecy of all. The one where we stop being passive consumers of the future and start shaping it ourselves. Let's pull back the curtain on one of the most spectacularly wrong predictions of our time, the 2020 British election, Red Wall collapse that never happened. Months before voters cast a single ballot, major polling firms and political analysts had declared Labour's historic heartland districts doomed, with one prominent forecaster giving Conservatives a 95% chance to flip seats that had been Labour strongholds for nearly a century. Media outlets ran breathless graphics showing swaths of the map turning Tory blue. Think tanks published white papers on the irreversible realignment, and betting markets surged with wagers on a Conservative landslide. Then election night came, and the so-called Red Wall didn't just hold, it barely cracked. How did so many experts get it so wrong? Follow the money, and the story unravels fast. The first thread leads to the pollsters themselves. Leaked emails from one major firm revealed they'd adjusted their methodology after private consultations with conservative-aligned donors, overweighting older homeowners and undercounting young renters, demographics that skewed heavily Labour. Another firm admitted to halting updates in key districts weeks before the election because their client, a hedge fund shorting the pound, had already locked in positions based on early predictions. The data wasn't just flawed, it was frozen to preserve profits. Meanwhile, media outlets amplified these skewed polls because doom scenarios spiked subscriptions. A News UK executive later confessed their election coverage plan relied on disaster framing after internal metrics showed crisis narratives boosted engagement by 40%. But the real puppet masters were the betting markets. When anonymous whales dumped six-figure sums on long-shot Tory constituencies, bookmakers slashed the odds, which pundits then cited as proof of impending Conservative gains. A Financial Times investigation later traced several of these mega bets to shell companies linked to a pro-Brexit lobbying group, a classic self-fulfilling prophecy. Flood the market with cash, watch the narrative shift, then let herd mentality do the rest. The fallout was catastrophic. Local Labour volunteers reported donors pulling funding after inevitable defeat headlines, while Conservative campaigns redirected resources to unwinnable seats, wasting millions. The cleanup was even murkier. Polling firms quietly revised methodologies post-election, blaming shy Labour voters rather than admitting skewed samples. News outlets deleted their most egregious prediction articles, replacing them with retrospectives framing the miss as an unpredictable anomaly. And the hedge funds. They made fortunes anyway, shorting sterling on early panic, then profiting again when markets corrected. The lesson: when prophecies fail, the prophets rarely pay. The costs are monetary, political, even democratic, always land somewhere else. This wasn't an outlier, it was a blueprint. From Brexit to the 2016 US election, the same actors profit by selling certainty in chaotic systems, then vanish when reality bites. The Red Wall debacle exposed the gears of the machine, pollsters as PR firms, media as hype engines, and markets as narrative laundromats, the only thing they didn't predict. That people might start noticing the man behind the curtain. Every time you check your horoscope, click on a poll-driven headline, or share a viral prediction, you're casting a vote in the oracle economy, not just with your attention, but with your wallet. Think about it, that astrology app you opened this morning, its parent company is owned by a venture capital firm that also funds political data mining operations. The breathless election forecast you retweeted, it was commissioned by a media outlet whose parent company holds millions in defense stocks. Even seemingly harmless rituals, like checking your daily tarot pull, feed an industry that thrives on your craving for certainty. The first step to breaking the cycle isn't just skepticism, it's forensic awareness. Start treating every prediction like a financial disclosure form. Who stands to gain if you believe this? Who loses if you don't? Resistance begins with the simplest act: pause before you engage. When a headline screams, "Market crash imminent," experts warn. Don't just skim, interrogate. Which experts, funded by whom? A study from the University of Pennsylvania found that nearly 70% of independent economic forecasts are bankrolled by institutions with vested interests, from hedge funds to lobbying groups. Even your local weather app isn't immune. Many monetize extreme weather alerts by selling user data to insurers. The moment you recognize these levers, you stop being a consumer of prophecies and start being an auditor of motives. Starve the machine where it hurts engagement metrics. Social media algorithms amplify doom-laden predictions because fear keeps you scrolling. Break the chain. Mute accounts that traffic in perpetual crisis. Use browser extensions like NewsGuard to flag partisan polling masquerading as fact. When a friend shares a dubious, exclusive forecast, reply with a link to prediction book's accuracy scores showing how often that source got it wrong. Small acts of dissent add up. During the 2020 US election, a grassroots campaign to fact-check viral polling errors in real time reduced their spread by nearly 40%. Redirect your resources toward transparency. Support journalists who highlight failed predictions as vigorously as they report new ones. Subscribe to platforms like The Correspondent or Ground News that expose funding ties behind forecasts. When a climate model's data is open source or a political pollster discloses their weighting formula, reward that transparency with your clicks and shares. This isn't just about skepticism, it's about creating market incentives for honesty. the most subversive move, embrace uncertainty. Ancient rulers feared eclipses because they couldn't predict them. Modern algorithms exploit your fear of the unpredictable. Reclaim the power of not knowing. When someone demands you act on their prophecy, whether it's a preacher's apocalypse or a pundit's guaranteed election outcome, respond with the revolutionary phrase, "I'll wait and see." The oracle economy collapses when we stop trading our agency for the illusion of control. Your attention is the most valuable currency in this shadow market. Spend it wisely. From the smoky temples of Delphi to the humming server farms of Silicon Valley, one thread connects every era of prophecy, control. Whether whispered by a priestess or generated by an algorithm, predictions have never really been about seeing the future. They've been about owning the present. The oracle's ambiguous verses kept city-states dependent on her interpreters. Medieval astrologers sold doomsday scrolls to nobles terrified of losing power. Today's data brokers and AI forecasters peddle the same product, just wrapped in digital packaging. The currency changes. Drachmas become dollars, sheep entrails become data points, but the transaction remains the same. You trade your uncertainty for their illusion of certainty, and in doing so, surrender your agency. Consider how little the core tactics have evolved. Delphi's priests framed their prophecies as divine will, knowing no one could challenge the gods. Modern pollsters and AI platforms hide behind proprietary algorithms and black box models, using the same veil of inscrutability. When a hedge fund's predictive AI claims a stock will crash, or a political consultancy declares an election statistically locked, they're not offering facts, they're manufacturing reality. And just like the ancient world, those who control the narrative control the money, the power, and ultimately the future. Carl Sagan's razor-sharp warning cuts through centuries of manipulation. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Yet today's prophecy peddlers ask for blind faith in their spreadsheets and simulations. A climate model predicting societal collapse by 2050 deserves the same scrutiny as a haruspex reading liver spots, not because either is inherently false, but because both serve masters. Follow the funding behind any inevitable forecast, and you'll often find someone who profits from its acceptance. The antidote isn't skepticism alone, it's sunlight. Demand transparency in every prediction. Who trained the algorithm? Who paid for the poll? What's the error margin, the sample size, the conflict of interest? When a pundit declares a political outcome guaranteed, ask for their track record. When an AI oracle claims foresight, request its training data. Refuse to let the future be a black box controlled by priests in Patagonia vests. This isn't just about calling out grifters, it's about reclaiming imagination. The greatest threat of the oracle economy isn't that it's wrong, it's that it robs us of alternative futures. Every inevitable war, market crash, or climate apocalypse narrows our vision, making the unimaginable seem impossible. But history's real breakthroughs came from those who ignored the prophecies, the Galileos who saw moons where astrologers saw omens, the activists who dismantled forever systems like colonialism or segregation. So here's the real choice. Will you outsource your tomorrow to self-appointed seers, or will you write it yourself? The next time someone tries to sell you destiny, remember Delphi's lesson: prophecy is the oldest con, and the house always wins. Unless you stop playing, subscribe to follow the money, not the myths.